Thank you very much for joining. We appreciate having you here. These are the types of sessions we like to kind of give everybody that's certified to be able to kind of learn more about Hogan. So just as we are getting kicked off, I'm Jag Nidger, your Director of Sales here at Pixonality Humans. Most of you probably know me. If you don't, feel free to reach out. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, and I like talking to people. And then beyond that, I'm going to send it over to Anissa. Before I send it over to Anissa, any questions, comments, please put them in the chat, send them over, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. Again, if you have been not been able to receive the reports that we sent out yesterday, it looks like it's in the chat. You can open up that zip file and get over to them, so they're easily accessible there. And Anissa, it's all yours.
All right,
and I'll be able to interrupt you right throughout. Anybody has any questions, please make sure you kind of add them into the chat.
Yes, please. We're here for you, so we want your questions. I'm Anissa Zarek. So I know a lot of you. I'm recognizing a lot of names and faces, some that I do not. So hi, Leslie. So if you haven't been certified, Hogan certified by me, you've probably been Hogan certified by my colleague Patricia. So I also act as a Hogan certifier, top resource person here at Pixonality for Hogan. So today I have the pleasure to host this webinar with you. So like Jag said, the mission today is to review a participant's Hogan results through different lenses, and we'll particularly use the lens of the leader basis report, the Hogan safety report, and the leader focus report. So obviously not necessarily all of these reports were optimal in terms of using them for this participant, but the idea was to showcase. And we'll start with the flash report that you've also received. We're going to finish off with a discussion, and we're going to add on some reports that we could have used that you know a bit more, maybe like the leadership forecast series, the insight series, but we wanted to go a little bit, off, the main reports that we tend to use to show you different lenses. So, and, a takeaway today, we hope, is that these different reports really allow us to have a very different lens and look at the results in a very specific and unique way based on each report, right? So, and more importantly, we'll have as a takeaway that, it's important to choose the right report to leverage the Hogan reports to either use. We'll see some reports are great to use in selection, others are meant to be used in a development context. So so just looking at our Hogan toolbox and knowing which report to pull out at which time is what we aim to do today. So again, we've got a few reports. We're going to focus on these 4 reports: the Hogan safety, the leader focus, the leader basis, and the flash report. So Hogan safety, maybe just raising your hand virtually, or your real hand, because we're not that many people. So great time to turn on your camera if it's off. Who has used the Hogan safety report? So just raise of a hand. So Jag has used it. So is that no one's used safety? So no. All right. So we'll get initiated to the Hogan safety, and the safety report proposes 5 dimensions of safety behaviors. So we're going to explore safety tendencies through the Hogan safety report, explore those safety dimensions. The leader focus, Hogan safety, what's important to know also is that it's based on HPI only. And it's going to be great. When do we want to use Hogan safety? When safety matters, right? So, so when safety matters, so a lot of roles where, machine operators, we've used it with truck drivers, bus drivers, where we want to minimize the chance of accidents, injuries, is really what we want here. Leader focus.
Sorry, Anissa, I just want to kind of add Hogan safety. Although we always kind of think about more safety related roles like warehouse or mining and things that you really get hurt. I've got clients using this report for all of not only their delivery drivers, but their sales, any of their sales team members that are traveling from one place to another. making sure that they're getting there safe, right? So just kind of one thought process on making sure that your employees are safe and outside of duties of warehousing and picking up boxes and utilizing machines, but salespeople, especially when they're transporting themselves from one place to another.
Yeah, so if they have, it could be any type of driving situations, like you say. And we've seen it a lot with bus drivers, like I said, truck drivers, but it can go beyond that, as you mentioned. Thank you, Jack, for this. So, and there's a lot of data research based on the Hogan safety, linking these dimensions to data, but particularly when we're measuring performance here through safety behaviors or accidents and injuries that are minimized. Leader focus is our next one. And leader focus, who's used leader focus? Maybe just raise your hand. Right, this is great. So you guys, you are all going to learn about new reports. So John seems to be have used
Well, I
it.
mean, it isn't that I've used it for leadership stuff, but this is different, right? This leadership focus is
Leader
different.
focus. So 6 dimensions of leadership. So
Oh, okay, no,
basically,
yeah, right.
okay, so leader focus is to be, so Hogan safety, just in terms of when we want to use it, either for selection or development, right? It could be used, and there's actually a different version of the report for selection versus for development. Leader focus is mainly for development purposes, and it basically combines HPI data and MVPI data into 6 dimensions of leadership. So based on a value, a combination of a value and an HPI score, we have leadership dimensions. So it allows us to, it's great to use. I use it a lot with high potentials cohorts where there's many, a group to assess, and we want to have, the results a little streamlined and simplified into a few key takeaways, right? And especially for new leaders, getting their natural leadership styles, which ones are more present, which ones seem to be less present. Leader focus will help us with this. So leader focus, more of a development tool. Leader basis is a selection tool, and it's meant to help select leaders based on all 3 tools, HPI, MVPI, HDS, and will help us. And there's even interview questions, so you'll get to explore this. Who's used the leader basis report? All right, so you'll get initiated to this report. Also, and finally, we have the flash report, and the flash report basically is not a report you'd give to the candidate, but it's a data report that helps you. And some of these reports, leader basis, leader focus, even Hogan safety, you do not have the subscales in those reports. So sometimes getting the flash report can give you a little bit additional information, even though you want to give just the leader focus to your participant, you might want a little bit more information for yourself to help you prepare for the debrief. So we've included it in the mix, and any team is a flash report is good for all teams for our next exercise. We're going to get back to Insight series and leader forecast series, which gives us a view of the person based on all 3 tools. The leader forecast series, what's the big difference between leader forecast series and Insight series? I can think of 3 main differences very quickly. What makes the 2 series similar is that both offer results on all 3 tools. And another similarity is that these 2 series also include subscales. So if you're in love with the subscales are available with both series. All right, so similarities, all 3 tools are included. So you get results on all 3 tools, and you get results on all scales and subscales. Differences, 3 main differences really quickly. Notice the word leader and forecast in the leader forecast series. So the leader forecast series will use a leadership vocabulary. I will talk about specific leadership impact. So this one's great for people in leadership position. More specifically, if you're dealing with a senior leader, I would definitely go for the leader forecast series. You will get also more detailed information in the leader forecast series. So difference number 2, you'll get a little bit more descriptive information on how to make sense of the data, whereas the insight series, you'll get maybe 5 bullet points, very straight to the point. Leader forecast series, we're a little bit more in the nuance, a little bit more in the details, and the leader forecast series will also include development tips and recommendations. All right.
Lisa, I had a couple of questions come up.
Yes.
Real quick, what level would you recommend the leader basis be used at?
So the leader basis is open to all levels of leadership, in the sense that it can help you guide your decision. It's not necessarily targeted at a specific level, but obviously, in any leadership role, specifically for senior, senior leadership roles, executives, you want to bring a lot of nuances, right? These are just generic benchmarks suggesting leadership roles. These are the dimensions that generically across different levels have been shown to be linked to success. It's not to say that these are specific to your specific level or your specific domain of leadership. So we have to just use it as a generic benchmark, but we could still use it for the different levels of leadership.
And just one last question before you kind of move over to the next slide is, can the safety report be used to assess a safety culture?
Yes, so actually, Hogan, does promote that, and they even have tools to aid you in terms of measuring the culture at the aggregate level. So definitely, yes, there. And this is where we can, tackle safety, yes, on a one-on-one individual and provide feedback to individuals, but look at trends also within a department, within an organization of where are we at risk and where are we stronger? Great question. All right, so let's get to it. We have Robin's profile, and actually I have not yet debriefed Robin. So Robin is a real person, not really named Robin, but for today, Robin will be Robin. And I'm getting you to all help me prepare for my feedback with Robin. So what I know of Robin at this point is that this person is a mid-level manager and manages a team of 5 to 6 team leads, and then 50 to 60 individuals that are individual contributors indirectly. So under the 5 to 6 team leads, overseeing daily operations, ensuring employee productivity, monitoring efficiency of all processes, and creating a positive work environment for employees is what I was told was key to this role. And just to understand a little bit more without revealing too much is that these teams are responsible for item delivery. So things to be delivered to destination X, Y, or Z. And a main key thing is to get whatever item it is from point A to final destination point B in a timely manner and in an effective manner without creating problematics and delays. While this person manages daily operations and ensures efficiency and productivity, the person also meets regularly with upper management to stay up to date with organizational changes, issues, and improvements, right? So, and bringing that back to their teams. So this is the information we have about this mid-level manager and their responsibilities. So now, we have the flash report. We will divide you in, but we will divide to conquer. We will divide you in 3 groups. Your group will be named either Hogan Safety, Leader Basis, or Leader Focus. You will have about 12 minutes. So this was a compromise that Jag and myself came to. So one wanted 10, one wanted 15. So we went with 12. So you have 12 minutes to answer the following questions. So based on Robin's profile, working in teams, what are the key points that are suggested in Robin's report? So with that specific lens, what main points, main takeaways do you get from the results? Identifying just 2-3 main strengths, 2-3 main areas of development that are coming through Robin's report that you were assigned. What does Robin's report suggest in terms of the context that are aligned or not aligned with his or her Hogan profile? In which context would the report assigned to you be relevant or irrelevant? So would we want to use this for Robin's role or for another role? So and in which context, right? So lots of questions there. If you don't get through all 4, that's fine. And here you have 15 minutes, but we've been cut to 12, but it's all good. I believe in you. So once you get back from the 12 minutes, we will debrief together. So I invite you to name a spokesperson in your team to report back on these 4 questions, the answers to these 4 questions, so that we can share with the others, so that we can learn about all 3 reports. So this is your mission, if you accept it. And we will debrief on all of this in just 12 minutes. If you do need help, I will pop in and out of groups possibly, but if you want to call me in to ask me questions, please just call me into your group and I'd gladly join. Any questions before we go in our breakouts?
A quick question on what you mean by context that align.
So in which context would the report assigned to you be relevant? So context could be just a first one, would you want to use it in selection? Would you want to use it in development, or both? Would you want to use it with a certain level of managers, individual contributors? So in which, type of context or situations would the report assigned to you be relevant or irrelevant? So just getting a notion of when would we want to use this report. All right, so hopefully we didn't cut you off as you were trying to finish up your thoughts, but let's take, there's about 20 minutes left. So let's take about 5 minutes for each report. We'll start with the leader focus report. So let me share my screen. So if you are the spokesperson for leader focus, we'd love to hear from you. So for the other teams, this is a highlight of one of the pages from the leader focus report. It's the summary page with, a score for each of the leadership styles, and each of the leadership styles are based on a score from the HPI and a score from the MVPI. So for instance, results leader is a combination of ambition on the HPI and power on the MVPI. So who's our anyone that was voluntold or that volunteers to...
I was going to say I'm the voluntold.
All right,
There you go,
Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah, super interesting report. And I'll say as a group, we came out with 2 insights. Number one, when we looked at the social leader, right? So on the lower end, right, you could see, I'm just looking here, the autonomy and efficiency on one end, and what it's built off is the sociability and affiliation. So she has a high sociability score at an 89, yet a very low affiliation, 26, right? Which kind of begs the question, she's looking for this social interaction, but yet she's not necessarily taking that social interaction and aligning herself to be a part of something. So a thought that we came up with, and how do you reconcile that, is perhaps she's using her social skill, which you can also see not from the social leader, but the lower interpersonal sensitivity at that mid-range, right? So she could also be strategic in how she establishes and utilizes relationships. So perhaps she's using her social skill as a way to network or be a part of groups and navigate systems, but as a means to an end, and not necessarily looking for just that total affiliation aspect, but the social aspect as a skill.
Very interesting, very interesting. And we see, like, when we look at the flash report, there might be the recognition kicking in also as a social need behind that sociability score that we see on the HPI. So definitely, but great takeaway there. All right.
There's a little bit of cheating in these stuff, right?
That
Because
is.
when we order any of the reports, like the safety, the leader focus, and the leader basis, they are independent reports that do not include the flash, right? So, for instance, when we're looking at leader focus, I believe it's based on the HPI and the MVPI. So no HES is being completed. So we wouldn't be able to pull off that flash report, right? And safety is HPI and
Totally. So, Jag, getting me back on track. Kevin, in which context did you find that this would be useful to use?
So it was a good question. I mean, the first thought that came to mind is every word here has a leader associated with it. So we were wondering, or I was wondering, if this report is specifically just for leaders. What if you were looking for individual contributors or, you know, first line managers? The word leader, I'm not sure, might suggest a higher level.
Yeah, and oftentimes we use this, and Hogan recommends using this with emerging leaders, new leaders, so that to, you know, discover more about their leadership style, right? Because it is a pretty simple report. There are 6 dimensions. It's not a whole view of all your Hogan skills, right? Back to Jag's point, right? We get 6 dimensions of HPI, 6 dimensions of MVPI, right? So we have a lens here, and we're focused on these dimensions of leadership. So it is more used with leadership roles, or, you know, people aspiring to, you know, I use it a lot with high potentials, newly emerging leaders in cohorts a lot. There's even a slide deck in terms of providing feedback at a group level on this, right? So oftentimes this is a very inexpensive report. Also, if I may say so, Jag, you know, you know more about prices, but this is really interesting when there's volume and we want to help develop, you know, a group, a cohort of leaders without necessarily providing them with in-depth detail, but a few key takeaways, right? What are 2-3 key takeaways in terms of strengths, in terms of areas of growth for them? And so I end up doing actually a lot of group feedbacks for cohorts with this one. Obviously, individual feedbacks are very interesting also, but this is one area. So emerging leaders, new leaders, we wouldn't necessarily use this with more senior leaders because it's a little bit less in the details, less in the nuances. But for, you know, first level managers or emerging leaders, or it could be interesting. Marie-Ève?
Yeah, could we use it in coaching sessions? Could it be like a tool or
Definitely, it could be.
Self-awareness? Okay.
Yes, because the purpose of this is development, right? So this is a great one to use in a development context. This is a great one also. The selection reports are not necessarily so if you, some reports, you know, are not so great to hand to a participant. This is a great one to hand to participants also, and one that even if you did not provide with a one-on-one feedback, is pretty straightforward that people can digest it. Obviously, I would recommend a group feedback. And again, we have the tools for that, a slide deck that already exists. So that's your leader focus report. And obviously, you know, looking at this, sometimes we do want to go a little bit more in the details in the sense that, you know, social leader, process leaders ends up being mid-range, but when we look at the MVPI versus HPI scores, we see a little bit of an unexpected relationship where Robin is high on security at 65, low on prudence, right? So there is nuance to bring in terms of valuing stability structure as a leader, right? And probably valuing, you know, an interest in process and procedures, but in a day-to-day, seeing someone that's very agile. So I wouldn't be surprised that, you know, Robin is interested in efficiency, right? That Robin is interested also in processes, but not necessarily, you know, at a higher level, right? And not necessarily in terms of, you know, implementing, and probably liking to surround oneself with, you know, a team that will execute the more finite operational details of creating processes. Any questions or reactions? All right, so that was your leader focus report. Let's move on to the safety report. So,
sorry, I just one comment, Anissa. You know, as we're talking about these different assessments, you know, because you guys already have the reports, you know, feel free to kind of flip through the reports as you're kind of listening to us kind of talk through them. You know, we can only show you so much of the report, and there's so much on the screen, but there's so much more detail on the individual reports.
Yeah, and what I like about the leader focus report is that, for each dimension, then you get your score on the MVPI, on HPI, and then the HPI, they give you descriptors of your behaviors, and then they talk about unconscious biases based on the MVPI also. That is really interesting in creating insight for the leadership style. And
Yeah,
again,
and just to kind of add in another comment, a lot of my clients use this in identifying high potentials, or once they've identified them, starting to try to round out them as a leader, right? So, if this person is high on process, let's utilize the information, give them a development plan to be able to work on other items.
right.
Sorry, Lisa.
No, that's great. That's great. The more information, the better. And I invite everyone to share. Let's take a look at the safety report of Robin. So now if we took this lens, we have a very different lens here. So voluntold for this team. So I know there was a team.
There was a few of us there. Leslie, Paul, John, were you there as well?
Yeah. I mean, we actually had to struggle a bit to sort of get into even talking about it because it was a little, well, we had to sort of, so we took probably half the time figuring out what to talk about, right?
Right.
And so that's why it's a little unsure. I mean, I'll start, and please, my team jump in. Leslie, you have some great insights as well. So we had to kind of refer to the descriptions above, and I have to get the report out myself. And so I think, Jag, you had mentioned this particular person was in a baggage handling area. Is that right?
Yeah, and operations overall, with an aviation organization, and they manage everything from fuel delivery to baggage and all sorts of moving parts that need to be able to come together, under this person. And then again, this person relates to a senior team that holds them accountable to, KPIs.
Well, they're obviously very, they're used to a fast moving environment. They seem to be very agile in terms of the decision making, in terms of a strength, in terms of just keeping things moving, pretty confident, pretty calm under pressure was part of the assessment here. And just with the other areas having to do with, well, okay, are they going to be overconfident and then not pay attention to details when they need to be attended to in terms of safety issues? So the vigilance around safety issues was definitely a weakness. And so the decision making, because they're working at a certain speed, they may not defer to upper management when they absolutely need to escalate, and they may just. And I think one of our members was talking about, is this a person that has seniority? Maybe they've been there a long time. They don't, forget upper management. I know what I'm doing, right? I'm just going to do it. Maybe operating there and may get in the way. So other team members' thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that because we did, for efficiency, we did take a sneak peek at the flash report, and the HDS score is showing really high, bold and being mischievous. So that kind of, gave us a little more insight into these developmental scores there. But also, the trainable it's high into the average zone. So is this person, or can we develop this person? And it looks like, that they're open to learning and growth as well.
I love the fact that the trainable was so high. That to me, even though it's still, within the average range, it suggests, he or she may be, senior or actually quite junior in the role and still looking and experimenting and trying different things. And when you combine this with what we saw in the leader focus, that innovator, came out clearly. There was one aspect of this in that that showed up in a next slide, the next part of the report, which said that the dependability was low. So that was a concern given this role. And I think for us, this is this contextually, this report would be very valuable from a development perspective for this particular leader, because of the need for safety in an operations environment, and to be focused on, looking at process, being compliant with process, being vigilant with process. Saw this as being relevant.
Yeah, and probably relevant also to, the teams that this person manages. So if we go back to creating a safety culture, right, if that's our interest, this would be of interest here. And then, for me, in terms of leadership, what I see is, modeling by example, right? And being able to, because I could see this person being great at, talking the talk, right? And being an influencer, right? And being a change agent. When I see the high inquisitive, the sociability, right? I could see this person being an influencer, but being able also to model through example. And I think the key that I see here is the trainable also, right? And if I cheat again and I look at, science is really high, right? And, this is a person that's data driven, right? So if we give them the data on, what works, what minimizes accidents, then we're talking their language. And, this compliant is about following rules, right? So this 7 doesn't mean that Robin will not follow rules and Robin just looks to break rules, but the rules have to make sense, right? So we don't follow a rule blindly. It needs to make sense. So this is where the training is particularly interesting, and we see someone that will react. And yes, Robin is very curious, so perhaps more distractible versus vigilant, right? And Robin likes to, is open to, gains and risks, so perhaps a little less naturally cautious. But if we train Robin in terms of understanding the consequences, then we see someone that's open to learning and reactive to that. So I see a great strength in terms of developing that culture also, and being self-aware.
Would the trainable, in a sense, show up with the high dutiful derailer too, in terms of just that yes kind of thing? Is that where that might show up? Because being a pleaser high on the dutiful derailer leadership challenge.
So the trainable is a lot about being interested in learning, right? And it's more about that.
Right.
But I see the recognition, the dutiful, as, wanting to please, wanting to be recognized. And I see other drivers of being more vigilant and cautious that could be fed through wanting to be recognized, wanting to have, this isn't maybe not relevant in this, but, having the sign that says, 400 days without an accident, right? So, being focused on that recognition and wanting to please and be aligned with their boss.
Oh, I see. Right.
And we have to think that we see some lower scores, but, the score is in the average zone, right? The overall score. And the recommendation of Hogan is to follow this overall, unless you have data. So I remember we did a validity study where we saw that there was 2 specific dimensions that really predicted injuries for a certain client, right? And those were particularly important. So again, if you have specific data, that's great. If not, Hogan refers back to the main scale. Thank you so much for this. So let's just add to the leader basis. So leader basis, now a different report, more for a selection, to be used in a selection context, using all 3. But here is where we see the shaded areas. The shaded areas basically have been identified as important for success for leadership roles. So scores inside the range increase a candidate's probability of success. So again, spokesperson or voluntold person for this last team.
That's going to be me. Excuse me. Hi, everyone. So we worked as best we could on coming up with this. So just, the context for this was obviously selection. The key points that we discussed was that Robin is calm and even-tempered, but may not like planning, okay with ambiguity, and again, just sort of disliking the details and may not push people that require, so may have trouble giving difficult feedback back to people, or maybe that's not the problem, but actually maybe you can give them difficult feedback, but not giving them anything to build on, maybe not being able to push them along. And also the tendency to kind of under pressure, go rogue and start doing things his or her own way. And I'm just going to flip back to, okay, so you've got that there. I think looking at some of these risks, the idea about coming up to solve problems that may not exist, or not necessarily check in with people. So under pressure, might just start paying attention to data points and kind of thinking about the process, but not necessarily checking in with the people on the team to say, hey, what's going on? What support might you need? What are you noticing? That type of thing. What do you think of that?
And it's go ahead, Jonathan.
I was gonna say, are we way off?
No, you're right on target. One point that I wanted to highlight is, again, these shaded areas help us also remember that, you know, some derailers might have more of an impact than others, right? We have to remember that on average, people will have 3.9 derailers that are high or moderate, right? So that most people will have a few derailers. And what I like about this report is, you know, kind of hinting for leadership. Again, this is a generic benchmark, but excitable, cautious, reserved, and diligent are particularly, you know, highlighted as watchouts for leadership roles generically. Now, again, that's not to say that for this specific, you know, role that, you know, mischievous is not one to watch out for, or, you know, if safety is really important, or if listening is really important, the bold and the colorful could be watchouts. So, you know, you have to take into account the specifics of your context. But it's interesting to see here, you know, I'd pay a little bit more attention to the excitable, right? And see that generally the person is very calm and steady, but there's a, you know, when the stakes are high, we might see a little bit of a different version of this person that could contrast a lot with day to day. And how does that impact? So I'd be curious to explore this a little bit more in terms of how that plays out. So it's interesting to see these benchmarks, and even if you're not going to use the leader basis, just to have them and learn from them, you know, with, you know, looking at these areas, and again, having a little recall here that prudence, you know, there's an ideal between average score to high, but if it passes, you know, the early 90s, this is where we might fall into micromanagement, indecisiveness, right? So having these graded areas and just giving us a little bit of a cue on what Hogan's data is suggesting in terms of, you know, probability of success, and where those ideal ranges and what scales seem to be particularly important generically is an interesting exercise. All right. So we have 2 minutes left. With this, you know, we could talk about this, at least on my side, I could keep on talking about this for a long time, but the takeaways we're hoping that you are leaving with is that different reports allow you to view a candidate's results through various lenses. You choose the report based on the purpose of the assessment. So is it selection, development? You know, again, you know, sometimes I use these, you know, I know the benchmarks, but I might still use the leadership forecast series, but I am influenced by the leader basis. But if I want to give, the desire to share the report with the participant is important, right? So the leader basis is great if your purpose is to give a tool that will give interview questions, that will give you a fit score, that will really aid you in decision making, but is less interesting if you want to share a report with a participant if it's in development context, right? So you'll base this on purpose, role of the participant, your interest in obtaining the subscale scores, although you can always have the subscales on the side, and your desire to share the report with the participants. So thank you. If there are any questions, Jag and myself will stay for a few minutes. If not, it's been lovely to chat with you. We hope you learned a little bit more about some new reports today.
Thank you very much. This was really insightful. Thank you.
Good to
All right,
hear.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
I do have a question.
Certainly.
Anika? Yeah. So basically people, because I've never used these reports and I think they're great. Basically people would still fill out the HPI, et cetera, and then it just gets translated into the particular report. Is that how this
Exactly.
works?
Exactly.
Okay.
So for Robin, for instance, Robin just did all three, and we generated all of these reports based on, filling the questionnaires once, right? So you could decide to, so obviously if you do the leader focus, they don't have to do the HDS, right? So just the ones that are
Sure.
targeted by the
So,
assessment.
part B of my question is that if you've had a client, say that's done all three, so you have the record of it, Hogan would have it in their system. Could you actually then call on a report from that, pay for that report, obviously, just call on this particular report out of that data. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
You
So
got it.
once we have the answers to the 3 surveys, we can practically pull off any report.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Giving me some thought. Okay, great.
And sometimes that can help you also in terms of, if you have 3 final candidates, right? And then in terms of, do I want to give the report or not, right, to the participants,
Sure.
right? So I can choose a certain report at a certain time and point, and then generate for, the person who gets hired that report that has more of a development feel.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that there's these lenses you could just pull data through, and that's awesome. That's great. Thanks both. And good to see you again. I'm gonna leave.
John, I'll tell you, I have kind of clients that, say they were using Leader Focus for some reason, and they pulled off, the HPI and the MVPI. And then later on, you can just send the candidate the HDS, and we've got all 3 through it, and we've got all 3 surveys.
What kind of timeline do you guys feel makes the data relevant? I know HPI would be more maybe long lasting because it's kind of hardwired stuff, but I know context matters, of course, but is it in 2 years, say an MVPI is a little stale?
Yeah, so Pixonality uses that exactly that 2-year mark in terms
Okay.
of saying,
That's what I
and there's
thought.
not a magic number, but we've settled on 2 years. Obviously, in a hiring context, it's always best to have the freshest
Sure.
results. But
Sure.
that being said, also, there's challenges in terms of getting someone to redo the assessment. Also, sometimes just the fact of redoing the assessment can change. If it's in a selection context, I would say that you have to ask permission to reuse the data, so you have to see if the person's comfortable. But in a development context, if they're willing to reuse, then you've got that flexibility, right? And I would say that I would not encourage them to redo them, and just saying that things might have shifted a little bit, but let's focus on what's relevant and in the assessment.
Okay, very helpful. Okay, so you've answered my questions. I'm going to leave and see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you so much.